difficulties. We're having this discussion in the stairwell to our basement.
Yeah, and still whispering.
And still whispering, even though our children are on a different level, and we have a monitor to make sure they don't sneak up on us. Which I'm checking right now. Yeah, there's nobody on the first floor. Okay. The last time we did a live stream, you brought up Elf on the Shelf.
Yeah. And you got mad about
it. And I said, we should look into this. What do people think about how Santa, how does that play out in adulthood? My basic thesis is we run the risk of our children resenting us, lying to them, and that their resentment undermines our credibility, and that they then will associate Christmas with disillusionment around Santa rather than it being around Christmas.
I could not more wholeheartedly reject anything about that.
And that it will sow seeds of skepticism and distrust that will make it difficult for them to believe in anything else. Oh my god. Okay. So what I did is I do with anything I need expert advice on, is I took it to Reddit.
Right.
I said, okay, dear Reddit, I basically laid out that this is my theory. Who thinks there's something to that? Now, by way of setting a little bit of context, in the United States, Reddit is obviously global. And I have no direct knowledge of what portion of the people I interact with on Reddit are from the United States.
Okay.
But it's the majority. I'm pretty confident. I don't know if it's 9/10 or if it's what it is. But in any case, as a point of reference, in the United States as of 2020, per Wikipedia. Yeah, let's see if I can do this. No, this is going to be terrible. Okay. So, if you add all the Protestants and Catholics and Orthodox together in the United States, that makes up 64% of the population.
Okay.
If you add together the people who identify as atheists and agnostics, that's 11%. So there's nearly 6 people celebrating Christmas for every person who's adamantly opposed to celebrating Christmas.
Okay.
Now, there's a lot of other people in other religions, and almost 20% of U.S. population in 2020 is unaffiliated. But that some significant portion of those people are former Protestants or Catholics, who no longer affiliate. So the question is, how many of them were raised with Santa? That's one way to look at the question.
Okay.
Now, then
I keep waiting for that.
The snow shovel that's propping up our Blair Witch light. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so then here's what I did. Redditors who I asked, who I engaged with, I categorized their responses based on certain criteria.
Okay.
Whether they are for or against Christianity, whether they are for or against Santa Claus, and whether or not they think there is a connection between those things.
Okay.
Now, the first thing I will tell you is, this pie chart is another dimension, but I looked at all of those different things, okay?
Okay.
Now, when you ask people what their theory is on Santa Claus, 4% of them say...
What was the sample size here?
Whatever. Well, if one person is 4%. So it was 30-something.
Okay.
It was 30-some people.
All right.
Of the 30-some people, 2 of them are adults who are practicing Christians. So your sample size on Reddit is not proportional to your sample size in the world.
Right.
But again, then the question is but how many of them are... many of them are explicitly agnostic or atheist, and many of them are unaffiliated.
Yeah.
So it wasn't that all 28 were or
Mhm.
30 were atheists.
Right.
But in any case, okay, so that's what we're looking at. So I'm gonna share with you. This is basically from the most anti, working our way toward the most pro.
Great.
The most anti response I got, which was a little bit tongue in cheek, was somebody said that they grew up Jewish, but they had friends who were Christian, and when they stayed over at their house on Christmas Eve and they woke up and there were no presents, they didn't think, oh, Santa's not real. They thought Santa is anti-Semitic because the Jewish kid at the sleepover was the only one who didn't get a present.
Who is having kids sleep over their house on Christmas?
Well, it's like if you have a friend who's Jewish,
not getting them presents. Like, I feel like either you're like, look, Christmas Eve is not a sleepover day. That's our house. Or you're like, that poor kid. I want you to find out who that is, and I'm going to send them a present. I'm going to send them a Christmas present this week. For real. That's so sad.
So then over half of the respondents said some combination of the following. Jesus is just Santa for adults, and realizing that Santa was a lie will help you realize that Jesus is a lie too. That was more than half of the people who responded, keeping in mind that nearly all the people who responded are atheists or agnostics or unaffiliated.
Right.
But again, the question is, of people who are atheists, agnostics, or unaffiliated, how much did Santa contribute to them becoming that? You see what I'm saying?
I mean, sure.
So this is almost like, this isn't a poll of the general population. This is a poll of
very anti-religious people. Anti-religious people. Well, and those people, like, unless I can touch it, I can't believe it. Like,
right. But what I'm telling you is over half the people who identify that way say, yeah, realizing Santa isn't real that does translate. It helps you realize that people are lying to you. Like, it jaded them. They are people who are implicitly confirming my hypothesis.
Well, I mean, I guess you could say that, but you didn't, like, unless you know that directly, like, that's also just people who have chosen not to believe, and therefore now they get, like, it what, like, did any of them say to you, like, oh, I thought Santa wasn't real, and then I rejected Christianity?
Only like 2 people explicitly said that.
Okay. All right.
But all right. So anyway,
I feel like we need to find a new place to poll people. Next year, we're gonna do a year-long project, and like asking people we know, like, yeah, okay.
Okay. Now the next group was actually really interesting. 2 people said basically the same thing, which is they are anti-Christian, but they're pro-Santa. They're actually being like, I think it is a positive good to have Santa in children's lives. And they are saying, and they, again, I didn't get the sense that they were saying this sarcastically, but they were saying, yeah, you let them enjoy the fantasy of it, but then actually it is good training and critical thinking and being skeptical of what people tell you. Like, as you get older, you start to realize, oh, I'm being deceived, and like following the clues to like figure out.
Yeah.
So they're like, yeah, they're like, you can have it both ways. Let them have fun when they're kids, and as they grow up, they have to learn the hard lesson of life that people lie to them.
Okay.
Do you think there's anything to that? Like, turn it into like a sleuth game of like, can you figure out who Santa really is?
I don't know.
Okay. Now the next group, 2 more people said that they grew up in households where Santa was a really big deal. And now as adults, they're either atheists or agnostics, and they don't do Santa in their house because they don't want to lie to their children.
Okay.
So they were like less jaded than the majority group, but they're still like sort of in that category of like, my experience was we made a big deal about Santa, and now as an adult, I'm not going to do that.
I want to know how these people had 5 and 6-year-olds that like that did not believe in Santa and did not ruin it for other kids, and like what did they do on Christmas, and like are their children like really sad on the inside?
I think they just like read the Communist Manifesto or something.
I feel like what this is all telling me is like I don't care what these people think.
Whoa. Like... Okay. Next one. The next couple people, no, never done to individual people. The next person said, disbelieving in Santa is not likely to affect other beliefs because everybody believes ridiculous things, and like losing faith in one thing doesn't make you lose faith in everything.
I agree.
Like everybody does believe ridiculous things. Okay. Another person said they were critical of my hypothesis because they said Santa was popular for a long time before we started to see a decline in religious affiliation. So it can't just be Santa. Because like in 1850 and 1900, kids were being also lied to about Santa, but they didn't grow up and be like, well, I'm an atheist. They were like...
I really reject the lying that you're like putting out there.
But you see what I'm saying? Like,
yeah. No, I agree with that.
So I thought that was an interesting counterpoint.
I like that person. You're also getting a Christmas gift from me.
One Jewish kid and one crotchety old man who was like, when I was a kid, nobody was fazed by being lied to about Santa. He was like,
when I remember in the 1850s.
He's like the oldest guy I met on Reddit. All right. Okay, now the next person said, I just realized this didn't print all the categories. The next person said that you should do Santa, and if that affects your children's religious beliefs, that means either you're making too much out of Santa, or you're not making enough out of your religious beliefs, or you're not doing enough to like differentiate those things in your children's head. And they like we got into these conversations of like, how do you know like Martin Luther King was real? George Washington? Like, are they gonna start doubting their existence?
Right.
But I mean, so that like it raises a question like, how do you talk about things in a different way so that you're not like conflate, like if Santa equals Christmas equals the Bible,
right?
If those are all on one cohesive set, then if a child's like Santa's not real, can they separate that in their mind from like any other association that they have with Christmas?
Yeah.
And like, how do you build that differentiation?
Voice is carrying a little more than verbal. No,
because we're in this echo chamber of a closet.
But okay, so I do actually think there's an interesting correlation there because I wrote my thesis in...
We're getting chats.
Well, not my thesis, but I wrote one of my...
Isn't Santa Satan? There was a thread about how Santa is Satan, but
yeah, I like that.
But
no, so it was what they were saying about how like, well, how do we know that anything's real, like George Washington or Martin Luther King? And I will say that one thing that highlights for me is, I mean, like, are people not acknowledging that Santa is derived from Saint Nicholas, who was a real person, right? Like,
yeah.
And so therefore, but just like George Washington, like and this is just my hypothesis. Like, I mean, I'm obsessed with the founding fathers, right? Like, I like American history, American founding principles, like, but I did write a paper about how basically like could George Washington really have been that great? Like, I feel like he's like a larger than life man, right? So like, similarly with Santa Claus, like Saint Nick, like has now become over the years Santa Claus, which is like this larger than life character.
Yeah.
So there's some.
But see, I feel like you're proving it in the wrong direction. Like you're dragging down, like, yeah, people should be skeptical about the existence of George Washington.
That's what I mean. Not saying the existence, but I'm saying like like you can start to be skeptical of like, could this really have been that girl? Like that person been that great? Could Santa really do that? Like, well, he was. Anyway.
All right. So, do you want to respond to the suggestion that is it a coincidence that Santa and Satan have the same letters in them? Do you think there's anything to read into there?
I mean, I have a lot to think about there.
What else has the same letters? Like Nasta. Okay. So my print off I wanted to do all this on my computer.
Okay.
And it didn't work. So I tried to print it off and didn't print off the last categories. But as I recall, the last couple categories were each of these are just like one person. So there's as many. We're now into the category back to like this opinion is held by an equal number of people who think Santa is anti-Semitic.
Okay.
So we went from majority views back to minority views.
Okay.
But the next one was actually teaching kids to believe in Santa may actually be a good training ground to teach them to believe in other things that like require faith or like a lack of evidence, like, but that's like that is too complicated to introduce to a child.
No. That's
so they were trying to be like, no, you have this exactly backwards. Teaching kids to believe in Santa helps them learn how to like believe in things, and then like as they get older they can believe in like bigger things.
But Santa ends up not being real in the sense of like the man that comes down your chimney. So I feel like that doesn't really like, so basically it's again the opposite of like training your kid to be skeptical. Like you should, like, just like in Santa, you should believe in the other thing. That's not an argument for me.
Okay. And then the last one that I remember, I think I skipped one, but the last one was that you just have to be prepared for the off-ramp. And the off-ramp should be like, once the kid starts to get real suspicious, you convey to them, well, listen, Santa was a real person,
Mm-hmm.
But like the traditions around Santa are designed to like give people an opportunity to be like generous and kind and thoughtful and whatever, and like surprise people. And Santa is like the mascot and the mantle that we associate with that.
This person read Humans of New York, which I talked about earlier.
Right. Yes. They didn't tell me that. They just wrote it to me like it was their own idea. And then you told me about Humans of New York, and I was like, this jerk just plagiarized.
Yeah. And I want to respond to all of these comments. I think
were you keeping up with them?
I couldn't totally see it.
First respond to that, and then we'll go back to the comments.
Okay, so look, I'm just gonna. I believe that there are very few things in life that are truly magical, like that. Our love. Right, our love is well. But like I feel like creating that for our children, and that like excitement, and that like just the spirit of Christmas and all that we put around it in terms of like giving to others and like doing special things and for other people, is like, it's all of that is like this magical moment that you only get with your kids for so long. And I absolutely agree with this person and their proposal for like, you do have to have an off ramp, right? And so like my approach is like, I want our children to believe for as long as they want to believe, but someday they're going to come to us, and I will get teary-eyed and like emotional about this, but they will come to us and like they will question, right? They'll say like, there is no way that Santa could physically, like, they're going to learn about physics. They're going to say, and that's what I hope they know when they're like seniors in high school. No, but they're going to recognize that like, this doesn't make sense. And at some point we do have to stop and say together, like, maybe this is the time that we are open about that. But I do think, like, again, this, like, it's the difference between the kind of religious approach and the Americana approach of Santa, I think, is a little different. There is the, like, there is founded in Saint Nicholas, who was like the ultimate like kind and loving and generous human being, and that the creation of Santa honors and perpetuates his goodness and his memory, and I think that is the right off ramp, is to say, like, just like he did those things for others, like, it's like now we do that for others. And so I'm really, like, that's, and I think, like, when people say, like, and maybe it's just because, like, I am by nature like a very I'm a very like on board cheerleader type person, right? Like I'm like jumping. I'm just like, I like get excited and can like be on board with things, and I'm not super critical. Like, I'm not gonna, like, Okay. When my parents, when I figured out that Santa wasn't real,
Yeah.
I wasn't devastated that my parents had lied to me. I was so grateful and like amazed at that my parents did so much to create that magic for me, right? Like we didn't have a lot growing up, and my parents, like when I thought back, I recognize, like, I can't believe how much they sacrificed to make that special for us. And I definitely think there are parameters that should be put on Christmas. Like, I don't like the idea of like kids getting crazy gifts from Santa, because like that's not fair. And you've got to think about like the community of people and different things, right? But I do think like that to me was something very special. I will say that, Christmas then really loses its luster after that, because you're like, oh gosh, like I know that like my parents worked so hard to buy this next thing for me, but I think I just think like I cannot see the downside, and I think there is a very clear way to explain that to your children, versus like your children suddenly like being like, well, how can I believe in anything? Like maybe they'll go through that phase, but they'll go through that phase anyway, like regardless of like whether they're Santa, they're going to think about that at different points in their education. So I don't know.
I have some questions, but I want to go to questions in the chat here. Let's see what we got here. So, why lie to our kid? I feel like you've addressed why lie to our kids. Do you feel like it's not lying?
No.
Oh, I thought they were saying like climbing through a window. They were saying like you're saying like we have this small time to like create magic.
Yeah.
But in the chat, there's some dissent, and like no, this also is a small window that you can do damage. All right, so I want to ask, even if we're still in the mindset of like we're still going to do Santa, and we're not going to tell them Santa isn't real until they ask. I feel like that's what you're saying.
Right.
You're like, no, I'm not going to tell them Santa's not real until they get their physics degree.
No, I mean, like I remember trying to ask like basic things, but I would always like kind of explain them away, kind of like our daughter did the other day, right? Like we were in town, and I think I mentioned there was like our town's like super into Santa and Christmas, and so like literally I feel like on every corner there was a Santa, and my daughter was like, wait a minute, and she'd be like, that doesn't sound like Santa. And then she'd be like, oh, but like, and she like came up with this creation, like why it wouldn't be that way. But there's going to be a point when she's going to like say, seriously, like, right? She's going to want to know. And so at that point, but I think there's like.
Granny's saying she has 4 kids. Granny, type into the chat what you did with your kids and how it turned out. While she's doing that, I'm going to ask my next part of my question. If that's sort of our backstop.
Can you check the monitor?
Yeah.
I've like panicked that I'm
ruining it.
Yeah.
Oh, they're all huddled outside this door with glasses. Putting their little ears to the door. No. Still clear. Okay. Okay. My other question, if we're going to use this backstop, we're going to say we're not going to preemptively tell them that Santa isn't real.
Right.
Step 1. If that's true, step 2, do you think there are any parameters we should put on how much we like create the illusion, like additional steps we have to like draw out, like how deep are we going to go into digging a hole of deception?
I mean, like we're gonna watch Santa Radar, and I don't know if you know, but the Secret Service has already been activated on the Big Red Alert. Checking for Santa.
I guess I'm asking, like you were saying today or this week, our child asked a question. You could have at that moment like, well, she asked a perfectly good question. Like that's the end of it. The illusion has been right.
I think there's also like a general age at which, like, if they're 10 and still believing, you probably like. I don't know because we're not there yet, but I'm like, I feel like maybe
Like 10.
Yeah, I feel like you kind of know that they already know though at that point. Like I think at that point they just are like afraid, like they know the truth, but they're afraid to know the truth. Like they don't want the magic to go away. And so like because like their friends at school are gonna say something, like,
Yeah.
I'm like just waiting for that day. I'll be like, that kid's a rotten apple, don't ever talk to them again. Well, but yeah.
It's got coal. That's why I say in that.
Yeah.
Bad kids.
It is on the naughty list.
No, but again, like this is like the thing. I think we don't have to solve for it today, but I feel like we should have the clearer sense of like how far are we willing to go in like creating an excuse.
Yeah.
Particularly because you're bad at that.
It's true. I think it's more of an age to me and like a maturity level. Like I just know our kids aren't there yet, and I also because like our oldest is still young. Like it's just like I want to preserve that for all of them for as long as we can. I will say that I'm not a big fan of the whole like art like being good so that Santa brings you gifts, right? Like we I think constantly reinforce like yes, like in the stories they're like a naughty and nice list, but the reality is like you're good because it's the right thing to be good and kind to others, not because you're trying to like earn a present. But we perpetuate that through all of life, right? Like you don't get paid for every chore you do in the house. Like part of it is being part of a family. We all do things to help each other, and so that's important.
Yeah, I wish I had all the comments right here in front of me, but because some people made comments to that effect. Okay, so we've got a guest in the chat saying 4 kids ranging from 33 to 23, and so Granny, you're not giving me what I need. I need to know, did you make a big deal out of Santa and you regret it, or you're saying you didn't make a big deal out of Santa and you are glad you didn't? It's not clear from your comment what your strategy was and how it turned out. Okay. Oh, okay. She did make a big deal out of it.
Oh, I want to know why it didn't work out.
Yeah, why
didn't
it
made me sad.
Yeah, now I'm on the edge of my seat.
But I also think but I love making a big deal about it. Like it's also like there's certainly like I feel like I was resentful about having to do it. I mean, I'd still do it because I think it's like exciting for our kids, but it's part of like the season. It's like joyful, and I like it, and I like thinking about everybody and what to do for them, and I like thinking about what's going to make them excited or feel surprised or so and and that magic that comes with all of the the Santa stuff.
Okay. So I think a key difference we're saying is you have to like want to do it. You have to be into it. You shouldn't like force it. Like, what would your advice be to somebody who's like, I really don't want to do this? You say, well, do it anyway.
Yeah, I say I still. No, I mean each family how they want to approach it and can do it in different ways, and it doesn't have to be onerous either, right? Like you can you don't have to get 20 presents per kid. We don't get 20 presents per kid, but is it what is it about it that stresses you out? Is it like the wrapping? Is there a different way to approach it? Is it that you have 4 kids? So we have 3, so we feel you almost. But is that a is it just because there's so many of them? Should you downsize it, or is it about the expectation? I think there's different ways to manage it. So it doesn't feel like that. I just kind of feel like if I love to do it and it, the magic is there for them, going back to what you were asking about kind of that psychological impact, it surprises me, and I would be interested in a broader grouping. I do think Reddit kind of, it brings to a very, I would say sometimes a very skeptical population by nature, right? Yeah. So, but would those people, would you be a cynic and a skeptic about that regardless, because that's just your personality, right? Or did did Santa's devastation make you that way?
It might not. You're right. It might not be a representational sample.
Thank you.
Yeah. We need to figure out how to get better data on this.
Yeah. But until then,
there's. But the other thing is, I do wish I had more details about different people's strategies, and you and I can go over some of the like long form comments. And for anybody who's watching this who wants to go to Reddit, r/household_management, you can find a link to all the best stuff on Santa.
Mm-hmm.
And some people did talk about like some of the nuances and strategies around like Santa shouldn't be the one who brings you like the biggest gifts.
I agree with that too.
Partly because it should, like, if you want to make it about the magic, you just don't want to make it about the like selfishness. Like it should just be like, oh, right, like a surprise thing, and right, like something a little bit special, but not like the biggest stuff should come from mom and right, dad.
Because it's really hard when like your kid comes home and is like, well, why did Santa bring my friend a laptop or that drivable Barbie car, right? Like why didn't, because it makes them feel like they're like, did I do something wrong? Am I not enough? And so if you're doing that for your kid, and I feel this way about everything with the Keeping Up with the Joneses, and I know it's hard to avoid it, but I don't love that like people, like that's why for me, it's like Santa gets them one thing on their list. It's not an extravagant, I mean, they're still little, so they're not asking for extravagant gifts, but it's like, I don't want them going back into school and saying like, well, Santa got me this thing and some other kid doesn't, because like their parents can't afford it or choose not to, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's about, again, like our approach to everything is like, we all live in a society together, and how can we be cognizant and thoughtful of others in how we live our lives and how we interact with others? And I think this is one of those things that I really strongly believe in.
Okay, so we probably have a little time before we have to like actually work out our off-ramp, our like exit strategy.
Yeah. But are you on board with like...
Yeah, no, I mean, like, I've never been like anti-Santa, but again, I worry though, I do worry about like the more we ratchet it up, it's almost like it like builds up the more potential for a crash. I think some of the things we're saying are already like mitigating that, because Santa isn't the one that like gets you the biggest stuff. Mm-hmm. Or it's not like everything in the house comes from Santa.
Right.
So like, and the other thing honestly that we talked about, which we should repeat here, is I think it's actually a really good step in the right direction. It sort of like lays the groundwork for later to involve the children in doing nice things for other people.
Right.
Because then you're just like helping prep them for like, this is what the season is about.
Right.
And like, you can do that under the like mantle of Santa, right, if you choose.
And so therefore I can understand how people who are not religious could feel burdened by this or like cheated by it or whatever, because there's no, you have no other way to explain like why you were doing this. Like if you don't, and I mean this, and then the separate part of like Christmas is about like Santa, but it's also about the birth of Jesus, right? Like I mean, and like so like we are also doing that with our kids on Christmas. It's not like Santa is the end all be all, and all we do is talk about like, and like that's what it is, right? Like, so I think they see the other side of like, and I think it's important for us to share that like Saint Nicholas and saints in general, and kind of the religious side of it as well.
Yeah, I do feel like we haven't been playing up our like nativity scene and that stuff as much this year. I think we gotta like...
Yeah, we didn't have our Christmas village out. Like we were really subpar.
We're a little bit scrambling.
But we also have had sick kids for the past week and a half, so I'll blame it on that.
Hey, Wesley, feel free to chime in with if you have children, what strategy you undertook with them and how that turned out. Coming to us from West Virginia.
Oh, Granny Juju, you're so sweet. I really love, I'm so glad you jumped on today and talked with us. And then, but I totally hear you. Like, I mean, on the flip side, right? Like, I'm like, I love doing this, but we are between like hosting friends and all of that kind of stuff. Like, I looked at Marcus today and I was like, I cannot make one more decision. Like, you have to prep lunch tomorrow for the kids, because I'm like, between like tracking what came in and what didn't come in and what I have to wrap and what I'm cooking for the day before Christmas Eve and what cookies we're making. But I realize at the end of the day that a lot of that I'm putting on myself, right? Like, I don't need 12 kinds of cookies, because that's all the ones I've baked in my whole life with my family. So trying to like, yes, it's super chaotic, like trying to like dial back and say like, what are the pressures I'm putting on myself, because like I have this image, but like, do I really need to make like all of these cookies, or, you know, have a drink with every meal that we're doing, you know, every course of our 7 fishes? Like, no. So trying to keep myself in check too. But thanks so much for all your thoughts. I think it's awesome to hear from you.
Okay, so we're gonna do Santa. We're gonna think of an exit strategy. We need to find other ways to make the season about multiple different things, so it's not all about Santa.
Yep.
Those are three pillars of our approach right now.
But I get to keep doing Santa. I was really worried that a couple of weeks ago that he was going to be.
Okay, Wesley is coming down hard against the Santa is Satan theory. I love it. I gotta figure out a better way to keep up with the chat while we're also.
Yeah. Now I will say, so here's the other thing, like as grown-ups now, right? So, and I grew up in a house too where
Granny
like
is cracking me up.
I'm like, I mean, no, it's true. So I think like I grew up in a household where we had our first kid in our 30s, right? But my daughter was the first grandchild. So bottom line, like we would kind of tongue in cheek, but we would go home for like Easter, and my mom would still hide Easter eggs, and we would like battle it out to find them, right? And so
you were saying as an adult before we
like as an
kids.
adult, right?
Yeah,
so I'm saying, but when I saw Granny Juju about like my kids just want cash now, right? Which I think is awesome. But when we do a Secret Santa as opposed to buying for like my sister, my brother-in-law, my other sister, my other brother-in-law, etc. We just do this like Secret Santa exchanges a money amount on it. But it's kind of gotten to the point where everybody puts one thing on their list and we all spend the same amount of money, and it kind of feels a little like, I'm like, well, there's no like excitement to it anymore other than who's your Secret Santa. But I told them what I want. We know we're all spending the same amount. It just kind of feels like, should I just buy my own gift at this point? So I do like try to figure
honestly, I wonder if like it's because we've gotten better at it. It's almost like when you don't really know what you're doing. Yeah. You're just like, there's just like they put names in a hat, and then like there's no good way to find out what people want. It makes you guess. Right. And so then you don't know what you're going to get.
Right. I mean, but the flip side is sometimes it's really terrible, or we choose really terrible things.
I think we should just double down on like white elephant gifts.
Yeah, that's really fun.
We should just like do 2 rounds of white elephant gifts instead of doing Secret Santa. Good. Yeah. Is there anything else you want to say about Santa?
No, 5 days, and it's gonna be magical.
We didn't do Elf on the Shelf though, because it's been 2 weeks since people heard. Like we didn't continue. And
our elf showed up one time, and it wasn't in person. Maybe that's
our tradition. Yeah, you get one thing from the elf at the beginning of the Christmas season.
Talk about stress. I can barely even remember to pack lunches. If I have to do 25 days of moving an elf, and if he doesn't move, he's like dead or whatever. I mean, like I will mess that up.
If you don't move the elf, that means you weren't good.
Yeah. So
the previous day.
Don't talk. I mean, like, yeah. Don't cave to the pressure. I mean, like, it's really hard because, like I said, I like love all the magic, and I don't want, when your kid comes home, they're like, "Why don't I have an elf?" But like, even if we were gonna go the Elf on the Shelf route, I was gonna only have the elves show up on the weekends. Because I just can't do it. That's like, a bridge too far. So, but I know a lot of people, I love seeing the pictures of people do crazy things, and I'm so impressed with your creativity. I do also think it creates this like culture of like always doing the next thing and what's the bigger thing. And I'm just not that creative. So. Anyway.
Okay.
Well, are we leaving our undisclosed location now?
Yeah, we're going to relocate. We're going to not say another word about Santa once you open this door.
That's right.
I will say, I do think like, I'm going to further collate some of the comments and feedback that we got. I do think I want us to, going into this year has been a little bit hectic and a little bit disorderly. Mm-hmm. But I think going into next year, because we got to have our act together with every passing year, they become more, perceptive and questioning and so on. So I think we got to have a plan going into next year better than we did this year. And I think that has to include like these parallel lines of effort of like doing nice things for people, like doing surprise things for people like throughout the season and all that stuff. So let's think about that too. Okay. I love you.
I love you too.
Okay. If anybody wants to join us for part 2, part 3, because this is part 2 because we had technical difficulties, but we have to get some business going.
That's right. I'm gonna go check on the kids to make sure they're actually still sleeping.
All right. We'll be back in 5 minutes, everybody. Bye.